What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer with BamaOnLine.com, joined as always by Blake Byler for the Alabama Pregame Show. And Blake, it's Georgia week. I know we weren't on here last week. Granted, that was the bye week, and Alabama had player interviews on Thursday, and then someone had to go on a bachelor party. So fun week last week. But we're back. We got a 5-game stretch of SEC games before the next bye week, so we'll have plenty of these on a weekly basis. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of this Alabama-Georgia matchup, on Tuesday, the SEC announced its the football opponents for the next 4 years. So now we don't know the dates yet. We'll learn the dates for next season, I think, in December. We know who Alabama is going to be playing for the next 4 years from a league standpoint. They have their 3 permanent opponents, and I know that's something we've talked about here on the channel before. Auburn, Tennessee, no-brainers, but the league actually showed some fairness, kind of surprised some people with Mississippi State as the 3rd permanent opponent rather than LSU. I know there's been some thoughts on that because that's a game that I know both of us love to see every year. But, Mississippi State makes a ton of sense. It's 90 miles down the road, and they've played a billion times in history. But, we know now, what the rest of the schedule is going to look like. Basically what it is outside of your 3 permanent opponents, you're going to play 6 teams in 2026, and you're going to play the other 6 the next year in 2027. And then those schedules are going to flop in 2028 and 2029 from a location standpoint. So next year, Alabama's home games are Auburn, Georgia, South Carolina, Texas A&M. And then their road SEC games are Mississippi State, Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU, and Vanderbilt. Before we kind of get into the overall thoughts, just what do you think about next year's schedule? What do you think about the 3 permanent opponents? I think it was me and Tim and Bone talking about that on here, so I don't think you were part of that. But I thought it should be Mississippi State, but it would be LSU. So kind of shocked, but I understand the reasoning behind it. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same camp. I think it's tough when you consider, like with LSU, they have so many rivals, and I have seen people talking about that a lot over the past couple of days since that news came out. They have like genuinely 5, 6, maybe even 7 teams that you could argue should be a permanent rival for them. So from that standpoint, I get why LSU got who they got, and it didn't really feel right to not be playing Mississippi State over the past 2 seasons, not last year and not this year as well. They're going to Starkville first on that new rotation, and it's just 90 miles away. Like, it's a really short drive. It makes the most sense for the fans, which I really think the league has kind of prioritized the fans and the fan experience with how they've done this. You play every team within 2 years. You have the chance to go to every stadium in the league within 4 years. So I think that's really cool. These annual opponents, a lot of them prioritize geography, and I think the vast majority of them are either in-state or neighboring state matchups, which is great. You want to continue to see that in a college football landscape that currently kind of in the modern era cares less and less about geography. The SEC is making a point that that's going to be a priority to them in the way that they do their league scheduling. So I really like the annual opponents for pretty much everybody. Only one that really doesn't make sense is Ole Miss and Oklahoma, which we were talking about right before we started recording. But as far as next year's schedule goes, I just pulled it up. Honestly, the home schedule next year is going to be great for season ticket holders. I mean, you're going to get the Iron Bowl. Georgia, another huge game at home. Texas A&M is always really good. Haven't played them in a couple of years. And then South Carolina has been pretty solid lately. And that was a really good game in Bryant-Denny last year. And you're going to get Florida State. They're going to come back for the return game of that home and home. So that's a ton of really good home games that Alabama's going to get. The road schedule, you've got the 2 annuals in Mississippi State and Tennessee. Obviously, it's always tough playing in Neyland. It's always tough playing in Starkville, honestly, but that team hasn't been, what it has been lately. But then LSU still on the schedule. I think that's going to be really fun. So you lose LSU as the annual game, but they keep it on for another year. And we still get that trip up to Baton Rouge, which is going to be really fun. And then Kentucky and Vandy. So those are 2 interesting locations that Alabama doesn't play on the road there very often. So I think it sets up well if you're kind of projecting and trying to see, what a win-loss record could possibly look like. A lot of your hardest games look like they're at home outside of those Tennessee and LSU games. So it'll be fun. Travel schedule is not terrible if you like to travel to road games and get to a ton of them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And there's some really good games later on down the line too, like that Georgia road trip in 28, Texas and Florida road trips in 29. Like those are going to be interesting. But honestly, really, really happy and satisfied with how it's worked out for Alabama so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at it too, the next thing I was going to kind of ask you is just the toughest draw of the 4 years. And I know we're looking way ahead. I think that 2028 season, when you have 5 road trips and you have games at Tennessee, at Georgia, at Texas A&M, at Carolina, at Mississippi State, that's tough. And then you think about it, I mean, it's not on the road, but that'll be the year that Ohio State is supposed to come to Tuscaloosa. So a tough schedule in 2028, no doubt. Obviously, anytime you go on the road, to Auburn is tough. So that 2029 schedule with Florida and Texas as well. But I think 2028 jumps out to me the most just because of what you add from a non-conference standpoint and then where you have to go away from Tuscaloosa.
I think that 2027 home schedule is really fun too. You've got Tennessee, Florida, and Texas all coming to Tuscaloosa. So you're going to have a lot of really big home games, a lot of big road games too. It's just great the way that I feel like 16 teams in the league going to 9, like the way that they've been able to kind of set this up with the 4-year cycle and rotation, the 3 annual. It feels like it all just kind of fits together as a nice little puzzle. And there's a lot of leagues like, 17 teams over in the ACC, even though they're moving to 9, like that's tough for them to work out. The Big Ten has 18 teams, so I don't even know what their rotation looks like. But I feel like with the way the SEC has it sets up really well for fans, not just of these schools, but of college football in general, to keep seeing these big matchups and get a nice rotation and keep the ones that matter too.
Alabama's going to be going on the road this weekend. We know that is their first SEC game, second true road game of the season. And honestly, on Monday, we got some really good injury news. It's been kind of a back and forth injury news week because you have really good news on Monday and not so great news on Tuesday. We'll start with the good, though. This is something we kind of anticipated. Kane Wommack came out right away and said that Tim Keenan's going to be playing on Saturday. You look at some of the video Alabama's put out at practice because we're not going to practice during the season. Tim Keenan and Jam Miller have both been moving well, and both of those guys are expected to play. So that's big boosts for the offense and defense because I don't want to say that they would have completely changed the outcome of the season opener, but you look at some of the areas Alabama struggled against Florida State, running the football and stopping the run. Those are two guys that's their strengths. So definitely welcomed reinforcements for Alabama going into Tallahassee. And then on Tuesday, we got the unfortunate news that Jamarian Latham was actually transported to the hospital in Birmingham with a neck injury. Anytime you hear neck injury, ambulance, going to Birmingham, just completely bypassing DCH, which I think everybody should do. I think that's always just your red flags. And so the good news is he's showing motion and feeling in his body. That's what you want to hear first and foremost. We heard from Kalen DeBoer on the SEC teleconference, and he said he actually received some texts from Jamarian, so that's good news too. I don't expect him at all to be available this week. And of course, you don't know what the rest of the season holds, but just to hear that he's doing well, I think is good news. And full transparency, we're recording this on Wednesday evening, so this is coming out, or we're recording it, it'll come out after, but we're talking before the first availability report of the week is out. But honestly, the big news for us was waiting on Tim Keenan and Jam Miller, and then Jamarian Latham's kind of mixed in with that because he's missed the last 2 games. So just it sucks for Jamarian, we know that, but it's really good news that Alabama's getting Jam Miller and Tim Keenan back this week.
Yeah, I think with missing Latham, obviously sounds like a pretty bad injury, and it's good that he avoided what could have been worse because like you said, it's scary anytime you hear neck injury. But I do think from an on-the-field perspective, Alabama's going to be okay, even though he's going to be out for a little bit because he'd been missing with a separate injury for the last couple of games. I think he got hurt against Florida State and hadn't played in the last 2 games. Quay Russaw started both games with Latham out, and then that led to a lot more snaps for Yanze Pierre as well. And they both played pretty well, and they both had a sack against Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. They've used Yanze Pierre. They used him in Wisconsin kind of as a third or a fourth linebacker. And they were kind of shifting between a 3-3-5 and a 3-4 based on whatever personnel package Wisconsin was bringing onto the field. So Yanze was kind of hanging out over about the sideline. And then if Wisconsin came in with multiple tight ends or something like that, Yanze would come in and take a DB off the field. So he's kind of almost in a pseudo starter role as far as the trust they have in him and how much they've been using him. So I'm not really worried about Alabama's Wolf room going into this, even with Jamarian Latham out. And then obviously the other 2 guys being back is really great. I mean, the defensive line's been banged up. Already lost Jeremiah Beeman for the year, who was the fill-in starter for Tim Keenan in the first game. So you were down nose tackle 1 and nose tackle 2, down to London Simmons, a true freshman, as your third guy starting against Wisconsin. And he's kind of started to come into his own a little bit as a true freshman. So it's nice to have him with a couple of games of experience under his belt. Keenan getting to come in as the starter once again, and then you're going to have Simmons rotating in. I think that's really good for the interior defensive line that coming into the season didn't have a ton of experience. So Keenan's going to be huge from that standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. We know he's a captain. And then with the running back room, with Jam coming back, we didn't really know what to expect with the backup running backs. And I think what I probably would have said the least likely thing happened was that Kevin Riley emerged as the top guy in the backfield with Jam Miller gone. I thought it would have been one of Richard Young or Daniel Hill probably. I'd say they've been somewhat underwhelming in terms of the production they've been able to put on the field. And Kevin Riley showed some juice, and as a redshirt freshman, got the start the last 2 games. So with Riley emerging, and then you know what Miller's going to bring, you'll have a nice little 1-2 punch there. With Miller and Riley is who I would expect to get the bulk of the carries at running back. But yeah, it's great to see those 2 guys back. They're very important to this team, 2 of the best players on this team, and also on different sides of the ball, and will help in different areas that, like you said, have been struggling here for a little bit the last couple of weeks.
I do know that Tim Keenan has been very instrumental, even though he's been out. Sat down with him during the bye week. I posted a story on BOL on Monday morning, and he's kind of that spiritual leader for this team. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about that is like he's a very religious person. And I think if you've spent any time around Tim or just heard him talk, you would get that. But he's talked about just his message to the team and how sometimes like the language gets colorful, and he's been fired up. I know before the ULM game, they had morning walkthroughs, and LT Overton was talking about it after the game about how you would hear the coaches, just giving out instructions or whatever, but you just hear TK in the background just yelling, and he's just trying to fire his guys up. And I think he's done a good job of that, and I think that can be very impactful on the field as well, not only because he's just a space eater, but I think his presence and his leadership is big. I'm interested to see just how effective both of those guys will be coming off of injury, because this is the first time we've seen them all year. But they know what to do. They're experienced players, and I think any reps honestly will benefit Alabama on Saturday. Before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of this game, I got a message from our friends at Whataburger. At Whataburger, we believe a late night shouldn't prevent you from enjoying a hot, fresh, made-to-order meal. That's why we're open 24 hours a day, so you can get your favorite burger whenever it's convenient for you. Treat yourself to a Whataburger or a double Whataburger. What about a double Whataburger with 2 kinds of melty cheese, bacon, and grilled onions? Now we're talking. Whataburger, just like you like it. And speaking of liking, I want to kind of ask you about your favorite moment or favorite game from this series. You look at it, it's kind of, it feels like every time these teams meet, it's like a classic football game. Is when you talk about and refer to for years to come. Last year certainly fit that mold. We've seen them meet in the SEC championship game. They've played for national championships. Where does it stack for you? I mean, it feels like, obviously, I wanted to say where outside of 2nd and 26, but I mean, yeah. Obviously, I think that's probably the number one for both of us. Is it But is there something else that comes to mind, or is it just the Tua coming in the second half game?
Obviously, that one's great, and I know you have an affinity for that one, so I'll let you talk about that one. My personal favorite game growing up, honestly, was the 2018 SEC championship game, the one right after, because it was crazy to see Tua come in after Jalen Hurts had a bad first half and Alabama was down 13-0. Tua comes back in, they win the game in overtime. But then for the exact same thing almost to happen a year later, where Tua, yeah, exactly. Tua wasn't playing a great game, and then Alabama's down 28-14. I think they made it 28-21, and then Tua gets hurt. And then I remember the broadcast camera pans over and you see Jalen Hurts warming up, and you're like, no way. This is like, there's no way that the exact thing with a backup quarterback coming in the same stadium against the same team is about to happen again. And it did. And it was really cool. I went and saw the Nothing But a Winner documentary a couple months ago when that was out in theaters. And they focused on that game a lot and had a lot of interviews from Jalen Hurts and a couple other guys. And it's just cool to see a guy like that that's so lovable and hardworking and just how revered Jalen Hurts is, for him to have a redemption moment like that really solidified him in Alabama kind of lore and history that I don't know if he would be otherwise if he had just ridden out the rest of the season as a backup and Tua stayed healthy the whole time. And then he transferred. I don't think Jalen would be as loved by Alabama fans necessarily as he did, because he got that opportunity to show the improvements that he'd made. So I was a big fan of that game. That was always a really fun one to look back on. And then last year's was crazy too. That was the first the second Alabama-Georgia game that I'd covered, but the first one that had a really crazy ending and a back and forth nature to it. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that 2018 game, I think you can sum that up at just Nick Saban's on-field interview after the game where he's choking up. Like, I'm not a fan of just post-game or like middle of the game, quick question to a coach. They seem useless, but that moment there is where they come in handy. And so, that one's on the list. I wrote down a bunch of them. Second 26, of course. I just remember being in the press box with my guy Travis Reier, and we see the sack happen. We just kind of look at each other, and then it felt like no time at all between that and the pass to Devontae Smith, and then we like both pushed our chairs back, looked at each other, and just started kind of punching each other and laughing. Like, did that really just happen? So I'll always remember that one. I also think 2015. My first trip to Athens, just rained the whole weekend. That's why I'm looking forward to this weekend, even though I think there's a little bit of rain in the forecast as well, to maybe see a little bit of Athens. But, talking to some of the players for stuff I've done for the game program in the years since, hearing from Reggie Ragland about that game and just the shit that was talked before the game and their mindset, that one kind of sticks out to me too. You could go down the list. I think, the 2008 game obviously has been brought up a lot. I don't know if Georgia's actually confirmed they're having a blackout or not. I think that was just a random Barstool account. So. But I think a lot of people think of that one. We could have made this whole show about past games, but we're going to talk about this year's game. And I kind of wanted to do it the next part, just looking at the offense and defensive matchups. I think with this one, I'm very fascinated to see what Ty Simpson looks like in his second road start. I think he's looked great the last 2 weeks. My man has thrown more touchdown passes than incompletions, 7-5, which is crazy. He's been really dialed in. I think he and the offense have really bounced back since the Florida State game. And you got to think, competition plays a part in that. Context is always key, but you got to execute too. And so the thing is too with Ty, he's had some drops by his receivers, so it could be even more. His completion percentage could be even higher. But I think that he can have success against this Georgia defense because you look at what Tennessee was able to do last week, throwing for nearly 400 yards, I think 4 touchdowns and 2 picks. Now, granted, I think the caveat in all of this is while the blueprint's there to have success through the air, you got to also be balanced and be able to run the football. And that, to me, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but getting Jam Miller back, focusing on improving the run game, maybe focusing on it a little bit more, leaning on it a little bit more is going to be important on the road. They got to be able to establish the run. I think that starts up front with this offensive line. But you look at it with Georgia and what they've been able to do this season, their pass defense hasn't been great. They're 81st nationally, but their run defense, they're among the top 20. So it's going to be tough. But I think if you can, you don't have to go out there and run for 150, 200 yards, but you have to have a consistent enough run game. It can't be Florida State where you lean on it the first drive and then completely abandon it the rest of the game, or you might have a similar result.
Yeah, I think the run game is going to be important, especially, going on the road in an environment that's going to be tough from a communication standpoint and just from a comfortability standpoint, because we all watched it with our own two eyes, like about a month ago now. What happened when the offense kind of unraveled, when things got uncomfortable in a tough road environment down in Tallahassee. I do think that Georgia's secondary is gettable, and I think we also saw that 2 weeks ago against Tennessee. Now, that was Georgia playing on the road, so you have to factor that in a little bit. But I mean, these stats, like Joey Aguilar had a day against Georgia. He was 24-36, 371 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have 2 interceptions, but I mean, he did light them up, especially early and then a couple big shots late. And I think Alabama's wide receiver room is better than what Tennessee has. So that's going to, I mean, the Georgia DBs are going to have their hands full, but a lot more goes into that than just are the wide receivers winning one-on-one matchups. You're going to have the offensive line is going to have to give Ty Simpson time to throw. You're going to have to establish a run game to the point where Georgia has to respect it and can't just drop 8 into coverage and think that they're not a threat running the ball. That's going to go a long way. And then also Ty has to be comfortable enough and to be able to make the reads and make the throws that we've seen him be capable of making. And we've seen him make over the past 2 games, like you said, only 5 incompletions, and it should be like 2 or 3, if we're being honest, if the receivers had held on to a couple more balls. So I think there is a good chance and possibility that Alabama can score some points in this game, and that they can score some points through the air. But it is a team game, and a lot has to go on other than just taking advantage of the advantage or mismatch or whatever you want to call it on the outside that I do think they have.
A couple more things just offensively for me is Ty Simpson is going to be facing Georgia for the first time. I mean, he's seen this team from the sideline, but he's also faced a defense in practice throughout his career that's pretty familiar. Like it's similar in what Nick Saban did and what Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann do in Georgia. So I don't want to say that's an advantage by any means, but I think it helps the fact that he's going in and it's not just completely foreign from a concept standpoint of what Georgia's going to maybe throw at him. I do think, though, we haven't really seen it a ton. I feel like Alabama needs to hit some deep shots in this game, and not necessarily just a ton, but like to keep that defense honest, like you were talking about. You can't just be kind of dinking and dumping the ball over the middle, the screen game, checking it down to the back and stuff like that. But I also think like when you look at taking those deep shots, like the offensive line has to play well, like you were talking about. I'm fascinated to see what happens at right tackle on that right side of the offensive line. Will we see Wilkin Formby start the game? Maybe Michael Carroll gets his first start. Jaden Roberts at right guard. Will they continue to rotate? That's something that I know Ryan Grubb, Alabama's offensive coordinator, has been asked about, and he kind of has hinted that they're still going to rotate. But I do think they want to kind of shore this thing up, and maybe it's the true freshman that gets an opportunity on the road. We'll see. That's going to be something I think in pregame warmups I'm really looking to see just how they go about the offensive line. Have they made any changes? Because I don't think it's been just abysmal by any stretch of the imagination, but I think you want to get your 5 best out there, and I think that's what the bye week was for. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really tough because we know the right side of the offensive line has struggled, but I mean, they're not to the point that we've seen that they're ready to fully make a switch. And we know that they like to rotate. We know that they like to keep fresh bodies in. And like to a point, I get that. But also to a point, I mean, Caden Proctor said it on the bye week. I think it was the bye week. He was asked about wanting to have is it better to rotate, or is it better once you get to a certain point in the season to have 5 guys that can gel and have that chemistry and play together throughout? And he said it was better to have 5 guys. And that's not to say that the players are against the coaching staff or whatever, but that is an opinion that he voiced, that once you find your 5, it's good to settle with it and roll with them. So I am interested to see when we get up there in the box in Athens and they get out there for warmups, who that 5 is to start the game. Because it kind of feels like we've been inching closer and closer to a couple of changes on those spots, but they haven't fully pulled the trigger with a starter yet. So we'll see if that does end up happening on Saturday.
And then defensively against this Georgia offense, like, I think you have to continue to apply pressure. They did a good job of that against Wisconsin with 4 sacks. That's the only 4 in the season because the official stats have now taken Keon Sabb's sack in week 1 away. So that's
really? Did they call it a rush or something?
They did. It's if you kind of look back at the play, I know we're kind of getting off subject here a little bit, but it sort of makes sense. It's lame, but
it is lame.
It is what it is. But yeah, they got to continue to apply pressure, but they also have to play contained because Gunnar Stockton's not a mobile quarterback. Like, he's not Tommy Castellanos, he's not Jalen Milroe. But he's a guy that's been effective with his legs, and he's used them at the right times. He actually leads Georgia in rushing touchdowns. And so he's a capable runner. He's a guy that can make things happen when things break down, which is dangerous. So you want to continue to see guys like LT Overton and Quay Rusar, those guys get home and finish on those sacks when they get pressured in the backfield, because they've been able to get in the backfield a good amount. It's just finishing those plays and not allowing the quarterback to escape that pressure is big. And then I think just, stopping the run, keeping the run game in check. When you look at Georgia offensively, they're among the top 30 in the country in rushing offense with over 200 yards a game. There's a wide gap between Georgia and Alabama because Alabama hasn't been great at running the football early on. And then from a pass standpoint, Alabama's top 10 nationally, but Georgia's right there inside the top 50. So they actually have more yards per game than Alabama with, I think, just a hair over 470. But this offense is good. It's just there's a lot of new faces. There's not a lot of the guys from last year's team that were making big plays in Tuscaloosa. They've obviously added what's the USC receiver's name? Zachariah Branch. Yeah. And then you look at it, it's really odd from a receiving standpoint. They don't have a tight end with more than 4 catches so far this season, and that's kind of odd.
That's for Georgia. Not normal.
Yeah, Georgia offense. Maybe this is the week they go off and get the tight ends involved, but I think it just starts with Gunnar Stockton and then keeping the run game in check, because if you're able to play well up front and then getting Tim Keenan back is super helpful for that, then maybe you're forcing he's not a young quarterback, but still a relatively inexperienced quarterback to make rush decisions. And we saw Bray Hubbard pick off 2 passes last time out. This defense is definitely capable of turning teams over. I think they want to be advantageous when they can be. So for me, it starts with the quarterback in that front, just kind of keeping him in check.
Yeah, the front, Alabama's front is kind of where I was going as well. And I feel like, whenever we talked to Deontay Lawson on Tuesday coming off the practice field, somebody asked him what the key is to a successful weekend, a successful game against Georgia. And the first thing he said was stopping the run. And I think that is going to be very important. Like you said, Georgia's been a very solid, a very good running team so far this season. They've also been, it's not one guy. They're very spread out. They've got 4 different guys, including Gunnar Stockton, that have run for over 100 yards so far this year. Their leading rusher has 189, but then they have 4 over 120. And all 4 of those guys have scored a rushing touchdown. So it's a very by committee approach. And like you could take that and say maybe you don't think they have like one game changer, or maybe they have a lot of capable guys that can run the football. And so that's going to be really important, because you can force Georgia into obvious passing downs. You can see if you can continue to build that pressure on the quarterback and your pass rush, and see if that continues over from the previous game. Alabama's secondary is still very, very talented. Like you said, with Bray Hubbard having 2 interceptions, you have a lot of other guys that I'm sure would like to get in on that for some takeaways. But none of that happens if Georgia can go 5-6 yards a pop every carry and just march on down the field. So it all starts with stopping the run, kind of like Deontay Lawson said this week. And I think if they do that, they've got a really good chance to get some stops in this game And you've got to get some stops on the road because it's tough when you get into a shootout and you got the crowd going crazy and you want to keep the crowd out of it, keep Georgia off the field as much as you can. And if they can hold them to closer to 3 yards a carry, like you're going to go a long way in doing that.
I also think too, like you mentioned, the secondary. Alabama's secondary is really good. They haven't really faced just a ton of pass attempts this year. I know that's kind of skewed some of the stats when you look at just what Alabama's been able to do. But with a guy like Gunnar Stockton, he had 2 games with 30-plus attempts. The Tennessee game was his first career 300-yard game. He's only thrown 4 touchdown passes this year, but I think he's made some really good throws when he's needed to. And I think obviously the one that everybody saw in the Tennessee game, kind of the over-shoulder throw to Humphreys in the end zone, was a perfectly placed ball. Right. So Alabama's secondary, that's going to be if they can kind of win that battle, I think that'll also be key. But again, it kind of just starts up front. I think if they can get pressure, those DBs are good enough to be able to force them into mistakes. So before we get into our predictions, we do have a message from our friends at Game Time. College football season is finally back. And there's nothing like it. The tailgates, the sound of the band, walking into Bryant-Denny Stadium, and seeing that sea of crimson, being in the stands and one of the best feelings in the world. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that's usually the frustrating part. You're stuck in lines, you're clicking through login screens and watching prices jump at checkout. All you want is to be there with your people cheering on the Crimson Tide. That's where Game Time changes everything. Game Time is the app that gives fans the advantage. It's the fastest, easiest way to grab tickets. A couple taps and you're in. The seats are 100% guaranteed. Fees are included up front, and what you see is what you get. No surprises. I actually just pulled it up the other day. College football tickets starting at just $25. The features are great. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. Follow your favorite teams to get alerts, and even save with zone deals, which is where you pick the section and Game Time finds you the best seat at the lowest price. So if you're trying to get to Bryant-Denny or any college game this season, like of course the one in Athens this weekend, take the guesswork out of it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code ON3 for $20 off. So Blake, on Saturday, we're in the press box at Sanford Stadium. That's your first time? And it has to be because
I've never been.
You were 6 in 2015.
I was.
It's when all is said and done, Alabama wins this game. In your opinion, if what?
I think they win if Ty Simpson looks really comfortable, and I think the way that he has played quarterback the last 2 games has been up there with maybe by himself as far as across college football, just the level of football that he's playing. More touchdowns than incompletions will do that. Like that's an unbelievable stat and just shows the way he's playing. If he's able to carry that level of comfortability, he's not going to put up the same, touchdown to incompletion ratio that he has the last 2 games. But he's going to look really good. And if that's the level of comfort that he has running this offense, finding his receivers, making quick reads, making decisions, that's what it's going to take for Alabama to go in on the road and put up points and be able to win this game. If he looks closer to the kind of rattled, uncomfortable version of himself that we saw in Tallahassee, it's going to be a lot more challenging and it's going to be more difficult. There are some understandable reasons as to why he was that in that first game. The whole team didn't really come to play. They were on the road, his first ever start. But he's done that before and he's already gotten that experience under his belt. So in his second road start, his first SEC start, I think if he looks comfortable, he's going to be able to carry some of this momentum over and Alabama's going to be in a good spot.
I think too, like, when you look at last season, Alabama's best games were coming off of these bye weeks. I think there's reason for optimism with that. And you say, well, they had a whole damn offseason to get ready for Florida State. But I think that this team is really good coming off of a bye. This coaching staff's really good coming off of a bye. And I know hearing from the players, and it is sort of kind of coach speak, but their big thing is to start fast and to finish. Like you can't They had a good start against Florida State, but that they didn't finish. They've had rough starts on some road games that they lost last year, and that didn't help them to be able to climb out of that hole. So there's a lot of ways you can go about this. I agree with Ty Simpson. I think if he's, if he's successful, if he has a big day, that bodes well for this offense. But again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. I think if you can get a consistent run game going in Athens, that'll bode well for this offense, because I think it'll keep the defense honest. That'll open up some things, whether it be play action or down the field for this passing game. And sure, that's on the backs. I don't really expect Jam Miller to go out and get 25 carries in this game coming back from a dislocated collarbone, but I think he can be a big boost for this offense. But I think it starts up front with the offensive line. If they have a good game and they're able to give Ty Simpson time and they're able to open the lanes for these running backs, I think this offense can have success and Alabama can ultimately win the game. I know that Georgia hasn't lost in 400 years in Athens. I know that Alabama has had struggles on the road, but I think when I think about this matchup, I think back to the last 10 times these teams have met, and Alabama's won 9 of them. The one loss is the national championship game. We know that John Mechie and Jameson Williams are not available for that. So I get that Georgia's been world beaters in between the edges, but Alabama's kind of figured that out a little bit. And so I kind of feel like Alabama's going to win this one, but it's going to take a big time effort up front from this offensive line. And we'll see if they're capable. They've shown some flashes, but they've also shown some kind of holes and weaknesses. And again, like you said, we're going to be watching pregame warm-ups really closely, see what that unit looks like. But it's going to be a lot of fun. This is why we do this night game between two of the biggest powers in the sport. Can't wait to get to Athens. If you guys have made it this far in the show, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star rating and review. We greatly appreciate it. If you want to check out anything on BOL, because we've had a ton of coverage this week, be sure to join. If you haven't already, it's $1 for your first week, so you'll get through this week. And it's a big one for sure. You'll want to be on the message board, because win or lose, that place is going to be bumping on Saturday. But until then, we will for sure see you guys next week. Blake is not having a second bachelor party. We don't have the second bye week right now. So we will be back next week, win or lose, rain or shine. So see you guys next week.